What is going on? This is Brandon Christensen, and I am here doing the commentary about Superhost. So, Superhost is my third feature film now after Stillborn and Z, and yeah, this is pretty exciting. I like doing this. So, right off the bat, I thought it'd be pretty funny to open up, just show immediately kind of the two vibes of the characters. We get this fake BS version of them, and then we also get the much more real and subdued version, which is what's about to come up here. This is always a difficult situation to set up these characters like this, and we're dealing with characters that I don't think people in general like. You have these vlogger types; they're always kind of putting on a show. So I thought it was kind of cool to kind of show the duality of their relationship kind of immediately off the bat right here. And you can definitely see it with Sarah the most, or Claire. She's definitely kind of the alpha of the relationship, and Teddy's just the fun-loving dude that just wants to hang out with her. Poor guy. I do wonder if she had said yes there, would people have liked her more? I don't know. But it needs to give him an opportunity to figure out his proposal and everything. Yeah, it was kind of an interesting situation how this movie even came about. When I was doing the film festival circuit for Z, I was up in Toronto for the Blood in the Snow film festival, and I was staying in a Airbnb. I kind of took the opportunity to go to Toronto and get a nice place. And when I got there from the airport, I used the restroom and I tried to flush the toilet and it would not flush. So I had to reach out to the superhost of the place and basically just explain what was happening. That I was pressing the button and it wasn't working. I took off the tank lid, checked the chain, all that stuff, but nothing was happening. So he sent up a security guard from the building and he took a look and he couldn't figure it out either. So I had to have the host himself come in, and he picked up a plunger and brought it in, and we had this super awkward conversation about just whatever, trying to ignore the fact that he was plunging a toilet for me. And yeah, he left, and it was kind of just like, what a strange situation that we put ourselves in. We are so private these days. It's so hard for people to trust other people, but then you give them a service like this that has a ranking, and all of a sudden they're totally open to it. And you'll jump into someone's car, you'll stay at someone's house. You have no idea who these people are, and that was kind of the germ of the idea of Superhost. I was also really late on seeing Creep, the Mark Duplass movie, and that was obviously a huge thing. I just sort of loved the idea of having this bad guy character who the audience kind of roots for, and it's kind of an interesting thing where it's almost like a Freddy Krueger situation where you have the bad guy who is the reason that you're watching and is the reason for the enjoyment. Like, you're just sort of he's going to be the bad guy. It's just a matter of time before he does something really bad. Until then, he's just super likable and charming, and I thought that was really funny because at the end of the movie, even though he's doing horrible things, you're just like, I like this guy. And that was, I figured if I could take that idea of a character like that and put them in a position like a superhost, it might be something kind of interesting and might make people kind of second guess sort of that 5-star rating that, everybody's dying to get. So yeah, there was that, and then another film that was hugely inspiring I saw late again was Green Room, and I watched that film at the edge of my seat, more tense than anything I think I've ever watched before. I don't think I've seen a film that made me that just that anxious, and so when I was writing this, I was trying to tap in a little bit to that, where you are in a place and then all of a sudden all of those securities and things like that you take for granted are ripped away, and you're stuck into a position where you're just like, what do I do now? And hopefully the audience kind of thinks the same thing, like their cell phone isn't going to work in this spot. They are cut off from the world, and of course there's a maniac with a knife outside that is very confident that they're going to kill them. So yeah, it was just it was just kind of taking these two elements and trying to craft a film, and I guess the vlogging stuff just sort of happened naturally. I don't even remember fully how it happened, but I think I went through sort of different scenarios of characters that would go. Like, you have more than one couple, you have all these things, but with the pandemic and everything, it made sense to try and condense it into as small of a cast as possible. And so we just ended up with Teddy and Claire. Um, it was kind of kind of an interesting idea to be able to tap into this social media thing and just sort of, you've got Airbnb, which also deals with reviews and likes, and what other kind of things have to deal with that. And I looked at YouTubers and guys like Mr. Beast and MKBHD, who I follow regularly. So I was able to kind of combine their style with the brash kind of YouTube explosions on the screen and the white text, and then MKBHD's slicker style, and came up with this fake vlogging duo that is just like an amalgamation of a bunch of different YouTubers. But yeah, now we meet the titular Rebecca, and this was always kind of the big thing, was like, what are we going to do? How are we going to cast this girl? Because we had such a small budget that we didn't have a casting director or anything like that. We basically just did. We just talked to friends. Like, I had worked with Sarah Canning on Z, and Ozzer Chow was my friend Drea's roommate. So she had done a feature called Empty by Design with him, and said it was a great experience and that she loved working with him and everything. So I reached out to him pretty early on. And Barbara Crampton, we had talked briefly earlier in, I think, 2019 about another film that never went anywhere. But I had this part of this character who's kind of a Karen, and I just sort of reached out to her and asked her to do it, and she was totally game for it, which was awesome. But Rebecca was always going to be the hard one. And we talked to a number of different actors, and it was just a thing about scheduling. A lot of people at this point, they had taken off the whole spring and the summer, but as the fall was approaching, a lot of projects were figuring out kind of the COVID situation on how you shoot and how you do things safely and everything. And so a lot of work was starting to pop up for a lot of these actors who had been sitting kind of dormant for a little while. So it was surprisingly challenging to find someone. But we ended up talking to Sierra McCormick, who my friend Josh Ethier worked with on his film VFW. And she dug the script. She thought it was really cool, but she was shooting another film at the same time. So it was just kind of a bummer, because I was really excited by her. But she threw out the idea of Gracie Gillum, and I'd personally seen her on Teen Beach Movie, but it never really clicked or registered. So I looked into her work, and I was really interested by the whole Disney Girl thing, where you come up at a time, you're doing a bunch of press for all these people, for all these projects, and you're just sort of putting on that best version of yourself. And I could tell that Gracie, when she was doing that heightened performance in those movies, singing and dancing and all that stuff, that it was really interesting that she could definitely put that on and be that person. So we talked, and she had read the script, she'd watched my other films, and she was just very much on the same wavelength as I was with the character Rebecca, and sort of what her backstory was. And I asked her what she thought, where's Rebecca coming from, and she gave a great answer, just talking about how she's kind of moved her way from here to here from South Carolina, and just sort of, has been taking out people on the way. And yeah, we just really clicked, and I'm super happy we made it work, because, obviously she does a crazy good job here. And it's just, we got really lucky there. So this was basically the same joke I made to the Airbnb host when he came over. The stupid small talk turned into, well, I'm glad it was just number one. And I had to put that in, just out of, facing my own horrible embarrassment. But yeah, it's, you've got a cast of 4, and it's just, you're just sort of putting it together the best you can. And I'm super thrilled with who we got, because it's always, It's always a struggle for sure. And I mean, the same thing happened with our crew. The film is, it's very low key. It's shot very simply because we had such a small crew. We only had 6 of us, plus the set medic. So on set, and Curtis Harder, who was the producer. So we had me, Clayton Moore, who is the cinematographer, Taylor Miller, who was the assistant camera, Alfredo Montenegro, the key grip, Chanston Bender, the gaffer, Jenny Egidio, who was doing makeup, and then Scotty Minchell was there for sound. So super small crew, smaller than my other movies by multiple times. But yeah, it was all people that I'd worked with on commercials and things like that. So I was very familiar with them. They were very familiar with me, and it worked out really well, luckily, because yeah, I mean, with COVID and all the expenses that we had to pay for things like having the medic. Our medic was Edgar Castillo, by the way, great guy. Um, but just having those expenses was like 15% of the budget, where all of a sudden you're scratching out, a lot of names on your crew list. No longer do you have a PA, no longer do you have an assistant director. Your grip and gaff team is very small. It's just 2 people. So we just really didn't have any of the luxuries that we normally have, which was kind of cool. I mean, it felt like just a small group going to making this small thing, but we had great cast to elevate everything, and I think it would have been nice to have one more person maybe, but I think we had exactly what we needed to get the film done. So when I started thinking about the whole idea of doing this YouTuber duo coming to this place, one of the things that really excited me was doing the 2 different types of cinematography, like doing the standard narrative cinema shooting with the red camera, and then being able to do something a little bit more energetic and goofy with the found footage camera, which was a C300. And yeah, it was just kind of fun to be able to intercut these things, especially later. I mean, the idea for it really took off when I was like at the end of the film. We can have the killer kind of take over their persona and be them chasing them down, and you're kind of intercutting the cinema and the non-cinema, and that seemed like a really cool thing. So this scene here was something that wasn't written. We realized as we were shooting that Claire was being kind of so standoffish and so cold that we needed a glimpse into see why she was like that, because everything was just like about the channel. And so we quickly just came up with this scene that we could shoot right at kind of magic hour, where she's just sort of telling us, the audience, why she's upset. And it sounds like kind of a stupid thing, like, oh, you've got less viewers than before, but for them this is their livelihood. And so we really felt it was important to sort of get into her headspace a little bit and allow her to open up. And so this scene just sort of naturally crafted itself as we were shooting the film. We had a moment, we were able to pop outside and do it. Yeah, the one concern I did have was, the opening sequence and that house tour, which is really the only 2 times that we see a vlog style. But I'm so used to cutting kind of traditional narrative that I was like, can I even do that? And so when I was kind of hesitant to go in and cut that stuff when I started, but it's actually really easy. You just sort of, any gaps in the waveform for when someone's not talking, you just get rid of it, and the jumps don't matter. And so that's always really funny. That's just like, it's a very simple way to work. I kind of liked it. So it was also kind of nice because I could just sort of, traditionally in these films, you're going to have that, whole exposition dump when they get to the place, and they have to, you're establishing the house and like where you're going to be in the film. I thought Don't Breathe did a great job of this because it's pretty much just like a single location film, but the way the camera kind of moves through early on, it really gives the viewer and the audience a good idea of what's happening there, which I thought was pretty amazing. So in this case, we were able to just do like a quick minute-long vlog and talk about all these things that, in a normal film where you can't cut away to a vlog, you would have to explain naturally, and that's always fun. So this is funny because scripted, this was not like this. There were no eyes in the script. It was just like a black figure off in the distance. And then Teddy was the one to wave, and the figure did not wave back. And then Claire jump scares her and everything. It's all the same. But yeah, it was really funny because when we were shooting it, I just was looking on the monitor and I was like, I don't know if the viewer is going to be able to see this. Like, I don't know if the everyone in the audience is going to immediately register that there's a figure out there because it's just so dark. And the hard thing with making a horror film is when you're dealing with darkness. David Sandberg did an awesome video essay on YouTube called "The Problem with Darkness." I recommend it. It just talks about how the dark, like black values from screen to screen, are so different that it's really hard to make it work, for everybody. So someone, like, when I'm editing it and I'm coloring it, I'm seeing it as, in its best case scenario. But then you give it to someone who watches it on, an older monitor, an older TV or something like that. All of a sudden the blacks are kind of raised, and you lose that impact. So when we were shooting, I was like, let's cut some reflector tape, put it on some sunglasses, and give it to her. And so we did that, and it was really creepy. And as I was editing the film, everyone's like, "Oh, that scene with the eyes is so creepy. It's so creepy." And I was like, "Cool." And in a vacuum, it's just like a creepy scene that works. But when it came out, people started asking about the eyes, and it was just one of those things where it's like, oh, that doesn't really pay it off. It's like, why are her eyes? I mean, Claire says it's probably just an animal because animals' eyes reflect in the dark like that, and that's kind of the reason. We're just like, oh, Teddy must be seeing something, must be seeing an animal and putting his own thing, whatever. Um, but yeah, it was funny because it was like a week before I had to deliver the film, and I was still working on VFX, and I'd a lot of shots left. My wife was just like, "You should remove the eyes," and I was just like, "But I've got so much to do. I can't, I didn't have I couldn't rethink that scene because everything was locked and everything. I didn't want to. The big thing was I didn't want to lose the impact when you see what Teddy's seeing. If it was just a black figure, the sound cue wouldn't really work that well because your eyes are probably gonna have to adjust a little bit to see, um, to sort of see where that figure was. So the eyes make it immediately identifiable as to where the audience is supposed to look. And to me, that was the most important thing. So when my wife said lose the eyes, it definitely made me feel like, oh crap, is she right? And I've seen a bunch of people bring it up as a question, and so she's kind of right. She's not wrong. And I think it's something that if we had the budget to do things like test screenings or something like that, it may have been picked up and been able to clean that up. But it just is what it is. Um, this whole thing's funny. Just when you got a movie about YouTubers, you're trying to look for things that would affect them and only them to make story beats kind of work for them. And being deplatformed is probably the worst thing that can happen to a vlogger or someone of that type. So that became sort of a big distraction for them, and that was kind of the whole thing. Is like all these distractions. There's Vera that shows up soon, and it's just another distraction to keep you kind of looking away from Rebecca as she's doing her own thing. Like she's got all of these things going on in the background. She's getting rid of bodies that she's dealt with Betty and Lou and all those things. Yeah, this conversation here was kind of lifted a lot from my experience with the Superhost. Um, but yeah, it's just funny. Not many movies make a big story point being deplatformed. So one cool thing that you can see in films, and just sort of what I learned when I cut Stillborn and when I cut Z, is how in post production you can kind of rewrite things. And the scene upcoming where Sarah sits down at the computer, which took like 17 takes, by the way. It was a lot longer of a dolly shot that told a lot more story, but ultimately the most important thing was for us as a viewer to see, see her screen and be like, they're losing, really kind of visualize how many subscribers that they're losing and get an idea of sort of their current situation um, to give Sarah that reason for being so driven here. But yeah, this dolly shot here, it kind of went and wrapped around her face, and then you're watching her kind of watch Teddy and Rebecca. That's my cousin's hand, by the way. You're watching her kind of process this person, and then she gets the idea. But this is a much more clear version of it, where we're like, here, she's watching them talk. She knows that the subscriber thing's happening. She's getting that idea with that kind of look away. She's lost in thought, and that that was kind of rewritten in the edit, where before she was just sort of watching them and getting the idea, but this way we could cut to the screen, which I shot at my house later, and just were able to go like, this is what she's upset about. This is it right there. So, yeah, this whole location up here in Mount Charleston, it's like 30-40 minutes from the Las Vegas Strip. It's just a very pretty mountain town that looks nothing like Las Vegas. You're driving up the highway, and it just the as the elevation goes higher and higher, so too does like the topography. You start seeing bigger bushes, and then the rocks start changing, things like that. Then all of a sudden you've got these giant trees, and you're just like, where the hell am I? So, being from Canada, which is no stranger to trees and green, I was I always like going up there, and it's just a really pretty place. And I shot a pilot for a web series called Black Ice back in 2015 up there, and it was a good experience just to get something. When you're down in Las Vegas, everything's very new, and you've got the desert, and you've got new stuff, and the texture's not really there. So to be able to drive 30 minutes, I mean, this is like 25 minutes from my house, but to be able to drive out and just have a totally different look for your film while still being in Las Vegas, that was really cool. But yeah, so finding the house, we actually originally had this really modern house, which was really cool. It was very, white, and it was windows everywhere, and it was just very, it was kind of like they're filming the world and they're being watched from the world and stuff like that. I had some cool ideas there. And I thought we had it locked down, but the owner eventually kind of bailed on us and left us stranded. And so I was panicking. I thought maybe we had to go to Canada or something like that to shoot it, because I didn't, it's really hard to find a house that will let you shoot there. And I thought we had it, but it fell through. So we had to kind of pivot, and I reached out to my friend Chloe, and I asked her, I was like, hey, I know you guys have a place up there. Do you have any friends or know anybody that is selling, or they're looking, they would rent out their house for a feature film shoot? And she's like, well, here, I'm actually here right now. Here's some photos of our house. If you're interested in this. And she sent the photo of the big great room with the big window, and I was just like, whoa, let's stop for a second. And she's like, yeah, I'm here right now. I'm here all weekend. So I was like, I'm jumping in my car right now. I drove up, and I just walked it, and I was just like, oh man, this can totally be a movie. Like, this is a movie house. It's so cool. So the script had actually been written for that other house, like a lot of the specifics and everything. So I had to kind of rewrite stuff, but the story didn't really change. It was all kind of the same. But yeah, huge shout out to the Churkos for being awesome and letting us shoot there, because we've been super lucky with all three of my films, with Stillborn, Z, and Superhost now. I need to stop writing movies that take places in houses, because it's getting old. So this is always fun to do, kind of the creepy house stuff. And this was sort of like, the stuff I'm very comfortable with the horror, because the rest of the film, there's this moment, and then there's the night before when Teddy sees the eyes, and then there's a very, very brief moment at night in the third night. But this is kind of like the standard horror stuff, whereas the rest of the horror is all in bright daylight, which you don't really see that often. And that was kind of an interesting thing too. And I think partially it was probably written that way because of budget, like just keeping things. It's a lot easier to shoot in the daylight than it is at night. But yeah, it was fun to shoot this stuff, because we shot this in the first week, and it was very familiar for me. It was just quiet, walking through a house, cool angles, trying to ramp up tension for an inevitable jump, or a non-jump in this case. And yeah, so this was a lot of fun. And then Gracie joined us in the second week, and it was a total different change of pace. All the night stuff was done outside of the one shot of her looking in the window. So it was, and I guess her watching the vlog too. But It was just interesting to just sort of do a mini Stillborn, a mini Z type week, and then we went into the much more insane energy of Rebecca in weeks 2 and 3. I always liked that shot. It was cool. Reminds me of a comic book, but you can see all the gear behind him because I was too lazy to paint it out in post. Um, but yeah, kind of doing daylight horror. I mean, I remember when Paranormal Activity 2 came out, that was kind of the big thing. It's like, oh, it doesn't wait till daylight, because the first one was, famous for every time it gets to nighttime and they go to bed, that's when the creepies start. But in Paranormal 2, they kind of stripped away that safety net, and even in the daytime, things were happening, like all the chairs falling and all the cupboards opening and things like that. It was just kind of cool to take something that's usually comfortable in horror, which is the daytime, and ruin it. That's always fun. Yeah, this denture thing was actually my brother's idea. I was talking about noises at night and what he could see when he goes into the toilet. My brother threw out the idea of dentures, and that led to another thing that we sort of shot, but it didn't turn out the way I did. So basically, these are one of Bobby or Betty or Lou's dentures. The problem was we don't really pay it off later. I mean, you can come up with your own theory as to why there's dentures in the toilet, but it would be it's mostly because Rebecca was cleaning up and she's got to get rid of evidence, and she tries flushing them and it doesn't work and it clogs the toilet. But later in the film, when we do see the dead body, it was intended to see both Betty and Lou, but and Betty would have no teeth, and they would kind of close that whole thing. But we didn't shoot those inserts. Like, we shot Osric falling and seeing the bodies and running away, but the actual bodies themselves, we didn't shoot till months later, like really close till the cut was locked. And we got Clayton Moore, the cinematographer's father-in-law, to play Lou. And I didn't want to ask someone to come out and a lady to come out and lay in the dirt and get all bloody and stuff like that just for an hour. I didn't want to cast for it and deal with all that, so I just sort of said, I'm going to do this myself. And for some reason, like, I didn't really see what Jeff, Clayton's father-in-law, looked like prior to that, so I was just like, I'm gonna go buy some old lady clothes, some old lady glasses, a wig, and all this stuff. And so on the day we went up, like, Jenny, the makeup artist, she came over and she painted me dark, and she came with us up to Mount Charleston to shoot these inserts. And we shot Jeff first, and he had makeup done and all that stuff, and he looked great. He looked like a real human being. And then I shot me, and I wasn't there to see what I looked like. I could only imagine how great I looked. But yeah, I brought the footage home, tried to throw it in. No matter what angle, whatever, no matter what shot, I just looked like a fake old lady. And so I was just like, oh man. So that was the shot, because when I shot Jeff, his mouth is closed, and I was just like, I'll be the dentures one. So I had my mouth open, and the footage looks fine. It's just me. I look like no one would. It's just a joke. It just looks like a joke. So, yeah, we cut that out immediately, and just stuck with just the cat and Lou. So that was fun. This was a joke. I thought it was funny. Sarah's performance is really funny. Just her focus being on not the weirdness of Rebecca making them breakfast, but what they ate. That sounds like something I would probably say. When I edited this scene, the edit didn't really change, but the when I was doing the post sound and the music and everything, we tried some different iterations of it, because right now how it plays is how I initially had it, where Rebecca says, "You are so welcome," and then there's just a utter silence as they just sit there in shock, realizing, like, it's super awkward. They don't know what to do because they realize someone's watching them. But when, the score came back for the first pass, there was a little kind of a creepy cue, like a drone here that just sort of raising tensions. And Joe, when he did the sound mix, he added breathing as it was watching, and it was fine. It was just a different moment. Like here, it's just quiet and awkward, and the audience is just supposed to be, oh my god, this is so awkward. And those kind of made them horror moments. And I felt like at the time when you see it in context, you're just like, oh wow, that's a new way to look at this scene. But inevitably we peeled it back just to make it more about the awkwardness than the horror itself. This was funny because we shot this twice. We shot this once as the way it was scripted, which wasn't sort of a continuous take. And I just hated it. I hated how it looked. I hated how we shot it. And so when we redid it, because we started shooting with a GoPro for all the found footage stuff, and the footage just looked bad. I didn't like the way it looked, so we switched over to the C300, and that's what this is. And when we shot this and they dropped the camera there, it was pointing up at them. I was like, wait, let's do the rest of the scene, because it was supposed to cut back to the cinematic footage, but this was just an interesting idea, way to finish the scene, and I love the way it worked. So, it was just kind of a happy accident that it happened like this, because it took two attempts to do this scene, and luckily we got lucky on the second one. So this was a surprisingly challenging VFX shot. It's so simple, but the side, because technically that's one sheet of glass there. And so if a rock really hit it, the glass would probably splinter through a lot of the panels. That sort of the woodwork there is just like it's not actually separating the glass. It's just one giant pane. But when I did the glass break VFX shot, it was nice to have it big and spreading really far, but it didn't seem very realistic. And everyone that saw it that didn't know it was a full, one sheet of glass, they were always like, that looks weird. It wouldn't do that. And I was just like, but it is, but the audience doesn't know. So it's kind of one of those things where cinematic reality and reality are different. And even though it makes sense in the real world, it doesn't make sense on film. So I had to kind of find the right panel to put it in and make that work, and figure that out. This scene here was Barb's first day, and the Beatles, you can see them behind her there. That's really the only shot in the film that you really see the Beatles. But this was, Barb's first day. It was 4 actors for the first time. It's a big dialogue scene, lots of talking, lots of movement. And we started shooting, and we started with that shot of Rebecca there. And then we realized quickly, like, these bugs, these beetles that we had, or that are there, they just started swarming. And the sun gets over the trees, and all of a sudden all the actors are just, tons of just beetles everywhere. So apparently at this particular time of year, these beetles just infest the whole area. They're just like gnats. They just swarm. And they only stay to the sunlight, so we had to, if you watch the scene, that the only shot that's in sunlight is that one of Rebecca standing back. The rest of this is nice and soft, and there's sunlight in the background, but the trees were all giving us all shade there. But when I scouted this place, I never saw a single beetle. And then the day before we started shooting, we did a load in with the crew, and we brought the truck up, and I was looking around. I'm just like, man, there's a lot of beetles. Like, there's a lot of these weird blue metallic looking beetles, and I don't get it. So I was just like, it's probably just today. It must be a weird day. Maybe it rained. I don't know. And so the first day of shooting, we're shooting the whole opening where they're outside and they're introducing, Teddy's screwing up the vlog, and just beetles everywhere. And we're kind of looking at each other, Kurt and I, and like, what are we gonna do? Like, this is a mess. We can't shoot during the day, and so we had to sort of watch and see what happened and adjust our schedule for it. But yeah, basically anytime there's direct sunlight, the beetles just swarmed. And they'll, if you can block it, and that's what we had to do. We had to put up a bunch of flags to just sort of block the direct sunlight, so they would be attracted to the flags themselves. But it was a real pain in the ass, especially with that big scene, because we lost like 3 hours waiting for the sun to move, and that was the only scene we had to shoot that day because we had Barb. So yeah, just very strange. This whole interview thing was something that I didn't know if it would ever make the film. Like, I wrote it very early on in the script because I had this very kind of clear idea of this woman kind of telling us a lot about herself without telling us a lot about herself. And, typically my films have had pretty short scenes of exposition and dialogue. It's just kind of like perfunctory dialogue that gets you from scene to scene. So this was kind of fun to really play with their personalities and have, Teddy and Claire react off of someone that's just being so insane. And so, it's kind of pretty close to the midpoint of the movie, and it's just very interesting to see Rebecca just sort of open up and, see how crazy things actually are in there. Um, but yeah, there's definitely. I mean, it was always kind of a question of how much backstory do we give Rebecca in this film, and we kind of piece things together. And this was probably the scene that when I first talked to Gracie, she was coming off of. I mean, the whole South Carolina thing. She mentions it twice here in this scene. Both that's where her stepmom lives, and the older couple that stayed with her during the holidays, they went back to South Carolina. So it's almost to me, it's just sort of these her her or subconscious, sorry, just sort of dropping hints about where she's from, because she's basically telling the truth. Like um, that's not her house for one, but the older couple is Betty and Lou, and she's just lying about who was staying with who. So yeah, this was a super fun scene to write, and we had a ton of time to shoot it. The only problem was, the sun. The sun, because of where the house is, it's right against a hill. Like right here, you can see it's a little later in the day because the sun is behind the camera, shooting way down, down at those trees, and they get super bright. And then as the day goes on, the sun falls away from those trees, and even though it's daylight, the sun gets blocked by the mountain very quickly. And it just changes the whole look of the scene. So we had, most of a day to shoot the scene, and it's a big scene, a lot of dialogue, a lot happens. We cut it down a little bit too because it was just a little bit too long. But yeah, it was really nice to just sort of spend some time and get a lot of takes. Now the problem is that this was like a 5 minute scene, and when you're doing resets and stuff like that, and you've got this big performance like that, it's really hard to uh, it's really hard to sort of do so many takes in a row, because I mean, you set up for one, you shoot it, it takes 5 to 7 minutes, and then you have to reset and put everything back, and even though there's not a lot of movement in the scene, it takes a long time to get through it. So you have to really pick your angles right. So we'd only pick, certain things would be shot just as specials, or we'd only do one take in one angle, just to make sure we have, the whole thing. Like this shot here, for example, we had to pick that up, and it's just we let them run through the whole scene. But I think on a bigger budget thing, you'd have longer for a scene like this, and you could really kind of cover it. So we just sort of did our best to get the story out and keep it interesting. Um, it was fun too, just to see what Grace brought to this, because I know this scene was a big deal to her. When she drove from where she lives to Las Vegas when they shot, and she's like, her boyfriend drove her, and she was just like, I'm working on getting a single tear, because the script kind of called for every time she has these pauses, it's like she freezes herself, and it's almost like a robot shutting down, like blue screen of death. It just like can't compute. She's realizing she's exposing too much, and she's sort of lost in thought. But as that happened, sort of this little bit of humanity drops out of her eye in the form of a tear, and so she was kind of working on that. But when she did the performance, she brought this empathy side to Rebecca, where everybody was just like, oh man, like they felt like she probably was very lonely, and she was just sad, and that's why she is the way she is, because up to this point she's just been kind of very goofy and aloof, other than her threat to Vera. um, but yeah, it was just kind of fun to see her really bring the sadness to Rebecca, and a lot of the people on set were just like, "Oh man, I feel bad for Rebecca now," and I thought that was great. And of course, Claire, all she sees is just like, this is a different type of response. This is a weird person we need to capitalize, and um, it's like this one. I mean, this is the moment here that if they had just left and finished their trip, or at any point, they would have been fine. But they had to get those views, and that's a real bummer. But yeah, this last bit here, this is funny because Osric's wearing the clothes he's supposed to wear the next day. It was a mistake. This is what happens when you don't have a wardrobe person on set or a continuity person on set. But yeah, it was funny. We had Gracie actually standing out there, and it was pretty cold, and we just did a number of takes, and she would walk out, and that was fine. It was there's the part after where she's watching them. She's watching them sleep. That was really fun to shoot because it was the end of the day. We had shot in the bedroom the shot prior, so we were just sort of wrapping up with these few shots, and it was fun just to talk to Rebecca. She had a walkie in her pocket, and I'm standing by the camera, and I'm just talking. That's a day for night shot, and I'm just sort of telling her thoughts and feelings, like, she's watching them. She's just sort of like, she really built herself up there. We just let her run for a little while, and she was breathing, and she was crying, and she was just, growling. It was really interesting just to watch Gracie go through that. And it was fun just to sort of talk her through different emotions to play with. But we thought about leaving this scene here. Upload stopped, cut to morning, and leaving this because it was like, at this point, Rebecca, other than that threat to Vera, hadn't really done anything yet. So it was a question of like, do we want to tell the audience that she's, this much, she's going to be watching them, it's really kind of a giveaway that things are about to go bad. But then you look at the poster and you go like, oh, that's right, we're not hiding this at all. We know something bad's about to happen, and this is just sort of like okay, audience, get ready, we're about to go to Crazy Town. So this was this was me operating the camera. I think they were setting up another scene back at the house, so we just drove down. This is just like right down the street from the house, not even a quarter mile. And we just went down, me and the sound guy. I don't know if it was Scotty, or we had a couple other guys step in on some days that Scotty couldn't make it. But yeah, this made me realize how short I am, and holding a camera in a selfie position, like a MySpace angle. You have to hold it pretty high, and the camera is not exactly light, so it's just this awkward dance Sarah and Osric and I were doing. But yeah, it looks great, and that it leads us directly to the other big scene. So this next scene here, this was probably, I think, the whole proposal thing. It was the big scene that took the longest to figure out. When I sent Sarah Canning the first script, like my biggest fear was that I didn't have enough for Sarah's character, for Claire to be doing. Like, she's so singularly driven by this thing that I was like, well, maybe she has some sort of ailment, and that's why she's been so down, and she's dying or something like that. And it was a bad idea. And Sarah brought it up like, I loved it, but I hated this one thing. And I was just like, crap, I know. I'm just trying to figure this out, because one of the first ideas I had when I was like a couple staying in an Airbnb was, if you propose and you pull out the ring box is going to be empty because the host snuck in the middle of the night and stole it. That was one of the first ideas I had for the script. And so, just because it was my first idea, I knew that I had to do the opposite of that, because if it was my first idea, other people will probably guess that too. So when the social media thing happened, we added that to these characters. That became kind of the new thing, was like, okay, how do we, if this isn't about Sarah or Claire, revealing, why she's been so glum or whatever, and why she wants to be able to get, financially, independent. What is it about? And then, very, very late in the game, it sort of turned into this awkward situation where the whole movie, Teddy's been setting up for this. He talked about it in the very intro. He's had 2 different vlogs about it before. But in his opinion, he's doing something both for the viewers and for himself with, he wants to marry Claire. And I think, there's probably years of their relationship that we're not privy to. And it's almost like a marriage where after a certain amount of time, you kind of take each other for granted and you get very comfortable. And it really takes a lot of work to have a great actual relationship where you're more than just like roommates living together. You actually, put in that effort to keep going on dates and stuff like that. But I think this couple here, they're at the point in their relationship where they've hit a wall, and I think Claire is just so consumed that she doesn't really think about him as that anymore. I'm sure she still loves him and everything, but to her it's more like she just wants to do the videos. And so when he does this and she sees the camera, there's just this horrific misinterpretation of what's going on. And it's not, everybody's initial reaction is about Claire, like, oh my God, what a bitch. She's being so rude to Teddy, but she's not wrong. I mean, Teddy put the camera there. Teddy has been prepping for this the whole time. It's like something that should have been a genuine moment, but it just isn't, because neither of them know what that is anymore. I mean, I filmed my proposal when I proposed to my wife. I hit a camera, but it wasn't for the views or anything like that. There was no confusion as to what it was. And so this being this, the confusing thing being, oh my God, he's doing it for the views. This is a great idea. It'll help our channel. And he's just like, no, I did it for us, but I also kind of did it for the channel. It's just a very kind of confusing moment. And this scene here, I hate, because it's funny, because we had to reshoot this opening shot because when we first did it, she wasn't holding the camera. And if you see the rest of the shot, she like raises her hands like right here, and you can see she's not holding it, right? Boom, both hands. But yeah, we shot Claire's side. I don't even know how this happened. It's just a weird movie thing. But then we shot Osric, and we only have like 2 takes of him. So we have all these great angles on Claire, different lens sizes and stuff. She's got this emotional kind of thing, and then you turn around on Osric, and we must have lost the light, I'm assuming, because I think he's got no real light on him, and she's all nicely backlit and stuff. I think that's what happened, is that we just ran out of sunlight, so we're just like, just get Osric's stuff real quick, and I didn't think it totally worked, but that's one of those things where it's done. You just close your eyes when you're watching the film. You just like look away for a second. It's very brief. And then here's a little ADR fix that we had, because the hard drive thing, to make it not a Deus Ex, I had to ADR the opening intro when she's about to get in the shower. She's like, she was supposed to say, I mean, she scripted, she said, can you grab some hard drives? I'm going to jump in the shower. And in this, I had them change it to ordering hard drives to the house, which did happen. Hard drives did show up, but there was no setup for it, so we had to ADR something there. And yeah, now we're kind of kicking the script into high gear. It's it's good times. It's fun because I have a security system at home, and there's some cameras and stuff, and that's where a lot of this stuff came from. Like, we have one in our kitchen, and we have one upstairs in our playroom and stuff. And when the whole idea of using technology for scares, like things, if I go onto my security app and I use the camera and I talk to my kids or whatever, it makes a chime, like the doo-doo, just like it does in the movie. And it's just funny, like when my kids are sitting there playing or something like that, and they hear that chime, it's like, oh crap, mom and dad are watching, and they kind of have that little bit of panic. But when if I'm sitting there and my wife's trying to talk to me and I hear it, I just know that it's like, okay, I gotta, something's about it. It's just different, the context of which you hear the sounds, and I think that's kind of fun too. Like the first time they hear it, they're at breakfast, and it's more shocking because they don't expect it. Like, they didn't realize that that's what that did. They just saw cameras and assumed like, oh, there's cameras in the place, whatever. I'm sure, a lot of Airbnbs have that. I've got another story about that I'll talk about soon. But all of a sudden, if you have the tension and there's this awkwardness, when you have those sounds that chime and the breathing and stuff like that, it just takes on a different life of its own, and it's just kind of creepy. It's fun to kind of take technology, because now people that have the same camera setup as me, when they hear that sound, if they see this movie, they'll just sort of think of this, and it's a little bit creepier. But yeah, going back to cameras. So I've heard a lot of people say, like, I would never stay at an Airbnb with cameras in it. And yeah, I mean, I don't think that it's abnormal. We rented a really big place when we shot It Stains the Sands Red. We rented a big house that was kind of served as the producer, director, actor home. where they all just kind of stayed during the production of the film. We didn't shoot anything there or anything like that. It was just it was just a big place that could house a lot of people, and we had it for a long-term rental. So it was the first thing, when we got there was a lot of cameras in the house. And one of the first things we did was unplug them all, because when we rented the place, there was X amount of people that were allowed to stay there for some reason. I don't really understand why the rule was the way it was, but they stayed there for a month or something like that through the whole production of the film. And when they checked out, they definitely left it in a state of disrepair, no damage or anything, just sort of a lot of garbage, and they didn't do their due diligence to clean up after themselves. So when the host of the place went back in and they had the cleaners come in, they tried suing us because of all the damage, and they said that they had all these photos from their cameras when we first came in being like, all these people weren't allowed to stay here. It was supposed to be for however many people, and there's more than that. And it was funny because there was all these attachments with, I was in it. I wasn't staying there, but it was definitely part of the idea here of having the cameras. It's just, there is this weird exposure that you can have when you're in someone else's space, and I think you kind of just have to, it's not your space, it's someone else's. They're more than allowed to watch out for it. So yeah, that was kind of funny. So there's this wave right here, and we were filming this, and Kurt and I were watching the monitor. It was really funny because when she does this wave, I don't think she could hear them talking. I don't know how she timed it that way, but she did it. And when I was watching it, like, we both just looked at each other and laughed, because we're like, that's 100% a trailer moment. And it's always funny when that happens when you're shooting. You just sort of realize, like, oh, like just the context of how you're watching it and hearing it. It's just really funny to get that clarity of, the vision. It's like, oh, I just saw part of the trailer. And this whole sequence here is kind of the creep scene, with her jumping out and scaring him. That's very, very, very much lifted out of Creep. And I don't know, maybe Becky has seen Creep, and so she's part of her persona, and part of these things that she does, she's lifting directly from that, because that's kind of what she does. But yeah, it's funny. She's gone full Rebecca now, and that's always fun. So this scene coming up, this was Barb's second day, and it's one of those, we're close to November now, and in Las Vegas, we hadn't had the daylight savings yet, but Las Vegas is so far east in the Pacific time zone that the sun sets way later than it does in most places. So I would say probably 4:30 to 5-ish, you lose the sun, and by like 6, it's pretty dark. And when you're up, right against the mountains like this, the sun hides very quickly. So we knew going into this day that it was going to be a beast. I mean, it's like a 6 or 7 page scene of dialogue with 4 different actors. And so it was just going to be like this massive deal. And we had, we also had VFX, or a big special effects gag with the knife at the very end and blood and stuff like that. And, it's nice if you can shoot the blood out first at the beginning, because that takes the most time. But when you're an indie and you're out kind of away from the house and stuff like that, there's no real way to clean someone up. So it's basically like 1, maybe 2 takes of it to clean her up. And that's about it. But, yeah, so we had an extra makeup girl on the day, Leah Cavini, and we this was our biggest day. It was 14 people on set, which is, we're usually around 12. Yeah, it was just a doozy. We did like 47 setups on this scene, which is crazy. I think the last time I did that many setups on one scene was in Stillborn, the sacrifice scene near the end, where she takes the baby and the neighbors come in and there's the whole chaos and all that stuff. And this was definitely different. I mean, going back to the production side of things, though, once, it's so pretty and the sunlight's coming through there, that's very early. And then, the sun's kind of gone by the very end of it. But I would say we had to do the 47 setups. We had maybe 6 to 7 hours, because we had makeup for everybody, and that took probably 2 hours, because it was just processing everybody, getting to the location and setting up and everything. And once we were going, we were just kind of going, which was great. But yeah, when you've got that many setups, you're kind of lost in sort of sometimes the ordering isn't quite right. And when you don't have an AD to really kind of focus on that, you can make some mistakes. And so there's definitely some issues there. But yeah, when I was editing it, I was kind of dreading doing this. I was just like, oh man, there's so many takes. It's going to be just like the stillborn thing, which was, I think, the last scene I edited because it was just a huge burden to shoot, and I was just terrified of editing it. And so one night I just sort of drank a ton of Red Bull and stayed up till like 5 or 6 a.m. editing it. And when I came out, I had the temp score in from the gift, and I was like super emotional because I was like, oh, the movie's pretty much done now, and I finally did this scene that was such a nightmare and all that stuff. And this one was completely different. I was cutting it and it was very fluid. I mean, there's big moments that happen that you have to hit, but in general, I thought the cast did such a good job and the footage looked so good that it just cut together super simply. I mean, once I did my first cut, I didn't really change that much. I just tightened a few things up a little bit, and it ended up being very, very nice and a big scene. This is another big scene. It's the interview one was a big one. The first scene with Vera was a big one. This one's the biggest scene in the film, and it kind of launches you into the third act. So, you have to have. There's just a lot going on here. And when I wrote it, the whole like it's just a prank, bro. That was almost the ending of it, and it was going to be like there wasn't going to be any deaths. It was just going to be the fake out. I mean, this was a very early idea for the script. It's like, could I just end it here? Could I just find a way to make this the ending of the film? Obviously, in hindsight, that's a terrible idea. But this whole part here where she's talking about, this is what we do. This is going to be great for our video. This was all written on the day. I mean, if you read the script now, it's the monologue here with her and prior to this part, completely different. And when I showed up on that day and we were setting up and stuff like that, I went down to kind of this picnic area that we had, and I talked to Gracie about it, and she was just like, hey, so I think we're giving away too much. And so I sat with her and I read it with her, and I was just like, holy crap, you're right. The whole, she basically told the story about what happened with Betty and Lou, and she gave away way too much information. So I just grabbed a pencil and I rewrote the monologue on the picnic bench, and made it way better because it makes her not confessing about anything. Because why would she confess before she fakes out? It was just dumb. I wrote it really poorly. So yeah, Gracie totally with the last minute save there made the scene 10 times better. But yeah, so typically in my movies, I try to only have one F-bomb. Stillborn had two. I wish it only had one, and then Z only has the one. And then I gave Barb the one here. Because, I mean, if we were to get rated, that could allow it to be a PG-13. This next part may have made it hard R, and it doesn't really matter since we were going to Shudder. But, yeah, it was just, I kind of like the idea of not swearing all the time. So this is obviously the big moment of the film. This is where Rebecca finally comes out of her shell and she becomes the person that we knew she was. And you can tell by the sunlight on that it's gone. Like the sun was just going down. Like it's just at the very top of the mountain, hitting the top of Gracie's head there. Like we were out of sunlight. So we really had to do this fast. And we had a knife. We had 3 versions of the main knife. We had the rubber, we had the real one that was really dull, and then we had one cut from the hilt, cut at the hilt. So in these shots when she's stabbing and at the end later when she kills Teddy, she's holding just the hilt of the knife. There is no blade. The blade was added in post, but we had the 2 pieces of the knife, and I could hold it on her cheek with the blood on it and kind of shoot a reference and like have her move her eyes around and move her mouth a little bit so that we could have just all the different pieces that I'd need for VFX. I love how she looks right there. And I love the music. That sounds so cool. Anyways, so yeah, we just sort of, it was the last, probably 10, 15 minutes for the whole stabbing sequence to shoot it, which, I would have loved to have 2 hours plus. But just sort of put the one piece of knife on her face and put the hilt on her, under her chin. And then Rebecca, at the same time they would react in reverse, and then I would reverse the footage in post. But Rebecca didn't look right, or Gracie, so I had her do a clean plate. I think Kurt suggested it because my brain was fried at the time. But basically shoot Rebecca by herself, just doing a stabbing motion. And so that they were kind of all comped together. It was a pretty significant VFX shot. And it was the last one finished right before I finished the film. I just was continuing to tweak that one. Um, yeah, and so now we're getting into kind of the dueling perspectives of the film, which was, big early part. This here is something that, if I have one big regret from the film, it's not having Osric or Teddy say something to the effect of, let's go inside and regroup and we'll figure out what to do. Because right now, when people watch this, not everybody, but a lot of people, they say, like, why are they going back to the house? And to me, my thought is just like, why would you want to be out in the middle of nowhere? I mean, Claire just said, let's go to the car. He says she might be waiting there. But having some sort of line to explain away, they're going there. They're just going to sort of take a minute, get their breath. They have a wall between them and Rebecca. So there's a little bit of there's a little bit of protection. If they were out in the woods trying to escape, and we don't know how far away they are from civilization, but if Rebecca finds them, there's nothing to protect them. They don't have anything. So getting a wall in between them and her felt like the smartest thing to do. It's funny because that's like the only time you see the neighbor's house. We tried to frame everything to not show any houses. But for a brief second there, you do see one, because this house is in a cul-de-sac with a bunch of houses. So there's, we wanted to make them feel secluded, so we never see them. But yeah, to me this always made sense, because I was just like, well, what else are you gonna do? You're gonna go inside and regroup. But yeah, I just wish I'd said that, because it's one of those things, like, I know it because I wrote it, but I don't think the audience really got that. So when people say, oh, they make the stupidest choice, I don't know. I think it's fine. I just think that they should have said why they did what they did. So yeah, this whole thing's really funny to me too. It's just like, you've got these people that rely on their technology. You take away their cell phones, they're totally useless. This was a scene that was added pretty late too, where it was just like one extra tension beat to add to it, just to have this slow walk, because we've established the idea that there's this one spot where they can get service from the very beginning of the film. Sarah goes out there later when she calls the customer service line. So making that a really long trek for Osric, and to just sort of ramp up tension, it became a new scene that was added pretty close to the end. But yeah, it's just kind of funny. Like, again, you have them being deplatformed being a big thing. Finding a cell signal just becomes like a big thing. It's kind of these small moments, but elevating them to a million so that you can, drain some suspense from it. Yeah, it was kind of fun to shoot. We actually shot Osric's side on the first day of Barb while she was getting makeup and all that stuff done. But yeah, it's just like, this was kind of my nod to Green Room, this whole sequence, and them being in the house and them being trapped, and they haven't seen Rebecca yet, but we don't know where she is. She could be anywhere. She could be dealing with the body. We have no idea. So it's kind of like that impossible situation. What are you as an audience member? What would you do? So it's funny because he's looking over to the side and it just shows trees, but there's a house right there. But when you lie to the audience, no one ever really knows. And then this is kind of the thesis statement for Teddy when, people are like, why isn't he fighting back? And it's like, well, I don't know. I get that Gracie's really small, but she's total psychopath. She's got experience, and experience trumps non-experience. Teddy's kind of a wuss. He's not a hero. He's a vlogger. But yeah, so you've got all this technology in the house. There's cameras, there's all this stuff, and then all of a sudden nothing is working the way you want it to. So it's just removing all those securities. Like, I think about, we've got the doorbell camera thing, and if someone's at the door and I can't see it, it just adds that extra element of creepiness. It's just, we like to have the security blanket of what our technology shows us. So when we don't have that anymore, it's kind of spooky. And then this is where Gracie turns full Pennywise, and she that was kind of the direction we were pushing for the end here. It's just like hungry, playing with her food, and yeah, it's just kind of it was fun, same kind of thing. She had a walkie out there, and I would just talk to her at the monitor, just giving her things to think while she walked, and the slow walk. The score for this is a little bit different than how it was delivered. Before it was very bombastic, and I thought it was, Joe and I, when we were doing the sound mix, we were just like, I'd love to hear the creaking of the footsteps. So we kind of stripped some of the score out and kept this kind of other ethereal feel to it. And oh, this whole running thing, that was Ozrik's idea. We were watching on the monitor, and he's just like, she should run at the end. And it was just like, oh, hell yeah. And so, that's one of those things. If you can stay open for it, and you have a time to let ideas come in like that, it's always nice to be able to do that. That shot always reminded me of the Jurassic Park raptor eye. Yeah, I don't know. This is funny. It's just seeing Rebecca through those eyes. That was another the thing, because in the original script there was a peephole, so Claire was kind of looking out and she was talking with that kind of distorted fisheye lens look. And that's how I thought the door looked when I wrote it. And then when I went there, I was just like, oh, there's windows. And I was just like, that kind of ruins that. Now she'll just be kind of a figure behind the distorted glass a little bit, like she is. And it kind of lost that thing. I mean, we didn't have any money to change out doors or anything like that. So we just had to use what we had. And yeah, when we were shooting, I think it was the scene when she's knocking to fix the toilet. I think it may have been Taylor Miller, the AC. He may have been like, hey, look at her. Look where her eyes are on the window. And we adjusted it and, had her, it kind of framed her up perfectly. And it was just another one of those kind of lucky instances. There's the classic, I'll be right back. She won't be right back. We know this from Scream. So... yeah, this is kind of just where things get total, that, there's not much time left for either of them. But we're getting to the point where Teddy finally picks up a weapon. And I think in the script, there was a bit more of a fight with Rebecca in the basement. But again, it's one of those things where it's like, we didn't have the foresight, I guess, or the money to get a prop fire poker. So the one that's in the film is the one that was actually at the house. And it was just like, when we were blocking out her walk to him and his kind of defending himself, it was just kind of a question of like, look, this thing's pretty sharp. I'm not going to come flying at Teddy with him holding this thing. Like, he could puncture me, he could hurt me, whatever. And it's just one of those things that you're kind of changing on the fly, and it's just like, okay, well, he tries to kind of poke at you, it's very quick, it's going to happen in literally 2 seconds. So it's just a matter of figuring out a way to get through that scene, because there's an apple box on the left. That's funny, I didn't notice that. Yeah, it's just kind of like, how do you, they can't have some big fight, but we just need to sort of have a little action moment that in the middle of she's able to stab him in the stomach. So yeah, this sequence here where she's talking and she's kind of monologuing to Teddy. Part of this stuff was in the script for the earlier part in the woods. Like, she told him, oh yeah, I tried to escape, and I can't remember exactly what she said, but she definitely said too much, because now it's more effective knowing nothing. So, yeah, good actors bring good ideas, and that was definitely one of them. It's fun to shoot this stuff, though, because you don't have to worry about him talking. It's just like, okay, here's one angle, let's shoot him just reacting for a second. Here's another angle, do it again and again and again and again. But yeah, it's just... this is where we're getting into real deaths. And in my first 2 films, I mean, Stillborn had the dead baby in the crib that we see for a brief second, but then this, and Z had the kid going off the banister, and it had Kevin, the husband, he was all bloodied up and stuff like that. But I'd never done an on-screen kill before, and so this movie had three of them, and you start with the big one, obviously with Vera, and that's like the really showy one. But Claire's here, with her SOS video going out and thinking she's gonna get saved from her friends and her fans. But it was we have the three deaths and we really had to make them work. So I definitely wanted them to be impactful, and that's why we're with Teddy and we don't see whatever happened with Claire and Rebecca when she's down there. I mean, if you look closely, Sarah or Claire has blood on her stomach, so I assume that she's basically she's already subdued. Like she's been stabbed probably in the stomach a couple times. She's lost the fight. She's at the end, and we're just coming into that. The whole like it's not what it looks like. I don't know why that was such a thing that was always there. It was just like even in the other house that we had, that moment was always just going to be that quick reveal of her being caught in the middle of a horrific act and just making the joke. It's not what it looks like. I don't know. That always amused me for some reason. But yeah, for this death, Jenny created a little rig that we put around Sarah's neck, and it just had a bunch of, I don't know what it was made of, a silicone type of thing, but it had a bunch of holes punctured in it, kind of like a shower. And, on slice, she would start pumping the blood through it and it would start shooting out. So, it looked pretty gross. We could only do it twice though, because again, time, it was all shot on the last day. That the whole basement is actually the garage. There is no basement in that house. It just kind of worked that way with the stairs leading down to the basement. But, yeah, it was just a matter of painting out the apparatus. There's blood in her tummy. The apparatus around her neck, right there, and just adding a little bit of spray, not much, because we did have real like that stuff running down her chest. That's all real. And it's just like such a helpless moment for Teddy because he's way too late. There's not a question. Like even if she let him, she stood up immediately when he walked in. Like she's still probably going to die from the wounds that she had. Like she was dead. And so this was kind of the big, that's the little fight there. It's literally like 2 seconds. It is what it is. Teddy's a wuss. So yeah, I mean, we had the two showy kind of deaths, and then when we get to Teddy's soon after, it's definitely a little bit different. It's funny, I had a couple friends over to watch an early cut of this. I think it was maybe the second cut, like after I'd gone through and made it somewhat watchable. And their biggest note was if he'd been stabbed there, he would bleed out a lot more. And it definitely, like, we didn't put the blood on. Like, if you remember in Scream, by the end, the one dude, oh God, I can't think of his name. Shaggy, he Matthew Lillard, he is just like, his shirt is just soaking with sweat and blood, and Teddy doesn't have that. He's got kind of just the one wound, and it expands a little bit, but it's not quite like they were saying it should be. And I was definitely always self-conscious about this, because I'm like, oh man, if the two people that I showed this movie to, if they're like, oh, there should be way more blood, he should, punctured lung, whatever, yeah, just I thought about doing some blood and VFX, but man, there's so much movement, it'd be impossible. And then that Teddy, oh hi Teddy, that's 100% the Pennywise part of the movie. This part here, we had to do a second time. We did the first time we did it, her blood on her face and on her chest was just not set yet. Like if you watch, I mean, the continuity of her face blood is way different. Like we shot this way later in the film than we shot some of the other stuff. Like even the ending of the film when she's driving home, the amount of blood on her face is way less than here, but it just looked a lot cooler here. So, yeah, we ended up reshooting that vlog because it unfortunately just didn't look as good. And so we reshot it, and we actually replayed the take that we wanted a million times to Gracie so she could memorize it. And it just was never, it was great, but it was just, there was this weird psychotic magic in that old take. So that laugh at the end where she's like, ha 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 ha, that was actually laugh from the take that we loved so much. This was fun to figure out. I mean, this was the whole kind of concept between the two different dueling cameras. but just sort of figuring out what it was that she said. And here's Jeff on the ground there, and then it cut to me and my stupid face and the dentures, and then we had the great cat made. I actually found that on Etsy, or someone found it. They sent me a link. I was looking for a stuffed cat or something that we could funk up, but yeah, this one guy, Alan Carnes, he does these zombified pet things, and I bought that, and it was pretty great. Um, but yeah, so there would have been the denture payoff in that sequence, even though it would have been very brief. But I think it works without it. It's fine. It's not the end of the world. It's not like it's glowing eyes or something like that. Um, yeah, and so now we're coming up to Teddy's death, and with him, it was just a much softer thing, and I thought that was really interesting. It's like it's still unflinchingly on screen, but it's not what it was. The first one with Vera, it's so shocking because it's the first one and it's out of nowhere. And then Claire's is so shocking too because you just don't expect it. You expect her to get away, and you come into it at a point where it's just like it's already too late. She's already lost. It's game over, and that was really funny. And so Teddy's just made sense to have, we never cut. It's a long oneer with Rebecca filming in found footage style. And yeah, it's just kind of like, it's like putting down a wounded animal at this point. Like he's just, you would expect for Teddy to have some last moment of revenge where he's able to fight back. And he does have his little moment where he grabs her, but yeah, that's it for Teddy. This shot was fun because it was just a oneer. We just did it over and over and over again to try and get the timing. There's the keys at the beginning. I'm standing right beside her. Clayton's operating, and we just had all these little moments that had to work with Gracie right beside the camera, like looking at the phone, and then handing the phone off to me just off camera, and then I hand her the knife at a certain point, and then she hands it. She throws it off and everything, but. Once again, we just used the hilt of the knife here. So if you look at it, it doesn't look amazing, but no one's really looking. And the footage looks kind of crappy because it's the found footage style. But I love just sort of letting the scene play slowly. It's just like Teddy has no strength. Teddy's totally dead. And when, the ring is the one thing that causes him to have any life because it's just like that's all that's left of him. And I mean, Gracie, all the takes were so funny. That was the hard thing about cutting Gracie's stuff was that every take she would do something great, and it's just a matter of finding out where Rebecca was in the scene and where she was in the story and trying to match that. But yeah, I mean, this was awesome. Just to finish up with Teddy like this and finish our Superhost and end it with the vlog, closing. But yeah, just it was, you can see the knife just sort of appear out of nowhere. I would definitely do it differently next time, but it is what it is. But yeah, it's just so sweet, and she's just such a psychopath. I love it. And then this whole epilogue coming up. This was another thing I think my brother, early on, he helped figure out. I mean, there's so many movies where you have the bad guy get away. And then at the very end, like if you look at the blood on her there's barely any. And that was kind of the first established blood, and that takes us all the way through to the ending, except for the downstairs stuff. She has the ultimate blood. So if you pay attention, it's really shockingly more blood after this moment. But yeah, I mean, you see a lot of movies where you have like the bad guy get away, and then at the very end, it's like, aha, I sent out a video or something like that. You lose. And that was kind of a trope thing that I wanted to subvert here, and I think we did a good job with it. I think it's really funny to have kind of a double fake out here where you have the one where it's like, hey, you are... I love this music by Blitz Berlin, by the way. We found this great temp score from... I think it was from The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, but great Trent Reznor music, and I needed that sort of somber, sad, just melancholy vibe, and they totally knocked it out of the park. I don't even remember what that was. This ring shot here, I don't know if I have time. Yeah, I do. The rings were something that weren't scripted, or if they were added very late because... My wife, Alyssa, did the wardrobe for the film, and she bought a bunch of rings, and Gracie just threw a bunch on, and she had a bunch left over, and it was just like, let's put them on a necklace. And we discussed, like, in the moment, and this was before, or this was, when Gracie showed up a day before week 2 started shooting. And it was kind of like, what if these are like trophies and they just live on her, and there's kind of a reveal. And that was a big thing that I think it adds like a kind of like a oh moment, because I think they're so, you can't help but notice them and you hear them a little bit jingling around, but giving them context it was really fun revelation that we had together. So yeah, a lot of these films, they kind of end with this, and it was fun to kind of take the piss out of the vloggers. It's kind of a boy who cried wolf situation where they don't get away. I mean, you could have ended it either way, but I think, the whole goal was to come out of this movie with Rebecca being the hero, not really the hero, but the anti-hero, someone that, even though she's a terrible person, she just murdered people. We as an audience at this point, I hope, there's imoscar.com, great reference. I hope, anyways, are rooting for her at the end. So it's like, yeah, it sucks to see Teddy go. It's, it's probably less crummy to see Claire go. But if she gets away, we're happy about it. It's just like Creep. Like you want him to succeed because he's so lovable. And this was my version of that, my take on that kind of lovable psychopath. And, coming into the credits, which I think everyone should look. I mean, I hope, it's such a short thing. I know people normally turn off the credits, but if you look here, it's hilariously short. Like, you've got these single cards that we have to do, but when you get to the meat and potatoes of the actual credits, just pay attention how short it is, because, not many people worked on this film in the production of it. And so when we get there, I will talk about that. But yeah, this was a challenge with COVID and dealing with the pandemic and trying to get a movie done and creating something in a time that, a lot of people weren't doing a whole lot. So I'm super proud of the fact that we were able to make this thing and come out of the pandemic with a film, fully made and released and everything like that. But right off the bat with this cast, Sarah Osler, Gracie Barb are main leads, and then you've got Jeff Butcher that came in to play Lou. I would have been in there. There's room for me, but I deleted it at the last second. The Churkos, of course, it was their house. So look at this main unit. That was the crew. 6 people plus the set medic Edgar. It's just like absurd. And then we had, when Scotty left, we had John and Ryan come in, and then we had Leah come in for the big day in the forest. But all these other people were behind the scenes, pre-production stuff. My wife was never on set. The catering, production matchmaker is a totally made-up thing with Sierra McCormick and Andrea Walter, because they led to Gracie and Osric. And then we're already into the post, and it's just like Blitz Berlin and Lousy Beats and Timeline and all the guys at Timeline that worked on the film. And that's it. And, this was a big learning experience to try and figure out how to make a film at this scale and to try and make something cool. And, super proud of the whole crew for doing what they did. It was a blast to be able to have a chance to work with them in a context like this, like a more narrative way than how we usually did. But yeah, that was Superhost. This was it was a great experience. This was probably the most fun I've ever had making a film, and I am very excited to get back on set and do something else, because it's I'm in a fortunate place to be able to make a movie, and I don't know. I hope you guys enjoyed this. All right, see you on the next one.